Global sea surface temperatures are unprecedented. Antarctic sea ice is unprecedentedly low for this time of year, and it was the hottest August on record by a big margin. It's the second hottest month ever, and this follows July 2023, which was the hottest month on record. There's more details on that in the press release on our website, with quotes from the UN Secretary General, WMO Secretary General, and the head of the Copernicus Climate Change Service. So this record-breaking summer sets the scene for the fact that we are seeing more extreme heat. We are seeing more heat waves. This does have an impact on human health and on air quality. And so with those words, I'll hand the floor over to my scientific colleague, Dr. Lorenzo Labrador. He coordinates the bulletin. Then on the far left, I have Sarah Bazart, and she is, if you have questions specifically on wildfires and sand and dust storms, she can respond to those. But Dr. Labrador will make the main presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to present to you the third edition of the WMO Go Air Quality and Climate Bulletin. This is the third edition of this flagship publication, and as with previous editions, it aims to provide annual updates on the relationship and linkages between climate and air quality, as well as provide examples on how the two are highly dependent upon each other. This year's bulletin is an update on the year 2022 and put the spotlights on heat waves and their effect on air quality. The bulletin is based on input from experts in WMO's Global Atmosphere Watch program, which monitors air quality and greenhouse gas concentrations, and so are in a position to quantify the efficacy of the policies designed to limit climate change and improve air quality. As in previous editions of the bulletin, this bulletin is released to coincide with the UN-sanctioned International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. I will take you through the main messages of the bulletin. The 2023 edition focuses on heat waves, but presenting a series of case studies that examine the interconnection between particulate matter, climate, and air quality. Heat waves are expected to worsen with climate change, and several notable heat waves occurred in 2022. So we thought it worth to look further into the impact of this phenomenon on air quality. First slide, please. The bulletin starts by giving an update on the state of the global particulate matter concentration. In 2022, concentrations of particulate matter with a diameter of less than 2.5 microns were less impacted by wildfires compared to the same situation in 2021. Trends of man-made emissions and natural variability played a larger role in controlling concentrations. Having said that, there were important fire-driven emissions over the Amazon basin in Alaska due to an active fire season in July and August in those places, and over South Africa in July to September. Low concentrations over China, Europe, and the United States, and high concentrations over India were mainly manifestations of decrease and increased man-made emissions in those parts of the world. Overall, the 2022 particulate matter smaller than 2.5 concentrations are consistent with the long-term trends, with decreases across East Asia and Europe and increases in South Asia. The bulletin also looked at the linkages between heat waves, large fires, and dust storms using two notable case studies. Extreme high temperatures lasting over many days foster favorable conditions for wildfires to ignite and propagate. Once started, wildfires expand rapidly as they encounter dry vegetation, which acts as a perfect fuel. Situations like these can result in higher aerosol emissions than in the absence of heat waves. An example of this is a lengthy heat wave in September of 2022 over the northwestern United States, which correlated with large wildfires and a significant degradation in air quality over the region, as reported by the US Environmental Protection Agency. Over Europe, heat waves can result also from intrusion of hot air masses from North Africa, which are often loaded with desert dust. In this case, the cause-effect relationship is the opposite of the forest fire case. Temperatures increase as a result of the intrusion of hot, dust-laden air masses from relatively far away. Such was the case during the second half of August 2022, where long-lasting heat wave correlated extremely well with an increased concentration of desert dust, as reported by the Copernicus Climate Change Service. The coincidence of high temperature and high levels of particulate matter, such as from forest fires or desert dust, poses a dangerous health risk for large parts of the population in the world. Although ozone is beneficial at high altitudes, where it protects the planet from harmful ultraviolet radiation, it is damaging at ground level, where exposure to high concentration is hazardous to vegetation and human health. Furthermore, there's a strong link between the occurrence of heat waves and high levels of ground level ozone. During July 2022, a heat wave was observed across Europe, where hundreds of air quality monitoring sites exceeded the World Health Organization ozone air quality guideline level of 100 milligrams per meter cube for an 8-hour exposure. Second slide, please. These exceedances first occurred in southwest of Europe, later spreading to Central Europe and finally reaching the northeast of the continent, following the spread of the heat wave across the continent. This instance of a heat wave and high ozone concentrations marching in lockstep provide yet another example of the potential of heat waves to result in degraded air quality, and aspects of heat wave that is not usually highlighted. As ozone formation is heavily dependent on sunlight and high concentration of its precursor chemical species, the hot and stagnant conditions created during heat wave events exacerbate ozone production by facilitating the buildup of highly reactive chemical species over several days. Next slide, please. As you can see, when you have a heat wave condition, this is conducive to a faster formation of photochemical ozone near the surface, as the reactions that lead to ozone formation are highly dependent on temperature, plus the high pressure conditions associated with heat waves also trap the pollutants near the surface, which also facilitate this process. The 23 edition of the Air Quality and Climate Bulletin also looked at the effects of fire emissions as a source of atmospheric nitrogen deposition to ecosystem and its impacts on these ecosystems. Fires are also an important source of nitrogen compounds to the atmosphere. These nitrogen-containing particles and gases, which include nitrogen oxides, ammonia, and organic nitrogen compounds, travel downwind, where a portion returns to the air surface in the form of wet and dry deposition. While nitrogen deposition can have a beneficial fertilizing effect, many areas around the world receive nitrogen deposition at rates that negatively impact ecosystem health and, subsequently, the quality of services that these ecosystems provide to humans, such as biodiversity, clean drinking water, food and forest products, and carbon storage. A recent study highlighted the importance of fire as a large, yet poorly understood source of nitrogen to downwind ecosystems. A wildfire forecasting system model predicted a significant increase in total nitrogen deposition compared to a critical low threshold, where critical low thresholds are the levels of deposition above which harmful ecosystem effects can occur, particularly in the state of California due to the historic 2020 wildfire season there. Wildfires dramatically increase total nitrogen deposition to major natural vegetation types across California, with an average August to October 2020 relative nitrogen deposition increase of up to 78%. Another study showed that fires may have contributed as much as 30% of total nitrogen deposition during the 2008 to 2012 period across areas of the Northwest US. Several predicted climate trends may influence the occurrence of wildfires over the coming decades, including global increases in temperature and regional increases in the frequency and intensity of heat waves and droughts. These trends are very likely to increase the frequency and severity of wildfires in many areas across the globe, with potentially serious ramifications for enhanced downwind nitrogen deposition and associated impacts. It is a known fact that air pollution can negatively impact crops and food production. In this bulletin, we also report on 2 recent WMO reports that elucidate the numerous interactions between crops, meteorological processes, and air pollution. Ozone concentrations, which are high in many of the world's most important agricultural regions, can reduce both the quantity and quality of yields of stable food crops. For example, globally, ozone-induced crop losses average 4 to 12% for staple food crops, with wheat and soybean losses as high as 15 to 30% in key agricultural areas in India and China. And while in recent decades, emissions controls have reduced ozone pollution in North America and Europe, in emerging economies, ozone concentrations are rising and may keep rising unless emissions are strongly abated. Agricultural activities are an important contributor to the emission and formation of particulate matter. For example, land clearing and the burning of crop residue lead to extremely high particulate matter pollution downwind in the regions where aerosol concentrations are high. And PM can negatively affect plant metabolic processes as well. Lastly, the 2023 edition of the Air Quality and Climate Bulletin concluded with an overview of how urban environment impacts air quality and climate. A new WMO report examines the current understanding in this domain and the need for better assessing the canopy layer urban heat island and the contrast in temperature between urban and rural settings slightly above the surface at about 1.5 meters, where human health is mostly directly affected. From an ongoing study conducted in the city of Sao Paulo, Brazil, both temperature and CO2 measurements from 2 parks indicated that urban heat island effect is reduced and CO2 emissions are partly mitigated by incorporating more green spaces, within cities, pointing to the benefits of nature-based solutions for climate change. In conclusion, this bulletin takes on the same topic as next year, which is to push the idea that air quality and climate change should be studied not a separate subject, but should be studied together. They are inseparable in the sense that many of the gases that are responsible for climate change are also emitted by the same sources that cause air pollution. Furthermore, there's an intricate link in the set of chemical reactions whereby atmospheric pollutants are produced in part from global greenhouse gases. So the subject needs to be treated as one. And in this bulletin, we have provided further evidence that this is the case, whereby we see that climate change episodes go hand in hand with increased air pollution episodes in many parts of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. And obviously the content of the bulletin is about 2022, but we've seen a continuation in 2023, especially with the heat waves, the terrible wildfires in Canada and Greece and parts of Europe. Sarah, do you want to add anything, or should we go straight to questions? Okay. Okay, so we'll start in the room and then we'll go to remote ones. So AFP, if you could just introduce yourselves, thanks.
Hello, my name is Christophe Vogt. I'm reporter with Agence France Presse here in Geneva. Thanks for the briefing, first of all, even if the news is not that great. I have 2 questions to start with. I have a million, but the first one is about 2023. We have seen record-breaking wildfires in the Northern Hemisphere, heat wave. It was the hottest summer ever registered. So can you give us a sense of how worse is it going to be how worse is the bulletin going to be next year compared to the 2022 figures? And then I just had no, let's start with that. Thank you.
Thank you. The simple answer is that it's yet too early to say. And Even though this has been a record-breaking wildfire season in many parts of the world, particularly in Europe and in Western Canada, you have to take into account the fact that the relationships and the interactions and chemical processes that link climate change to atmospheric pollution are not linear. So while we may expect an increase in atmospheric pollution due to these wildfires, which are partly due to climate change, we cannot say for certain how bad or how much worse the situation is going to be about this year. We have to wait until the data is collected, until summer is definitely over, and the scientists have time to analyze the data and come up with conclusions. It'll be early and unfair to say that because what we have seen has been worse so far, we can expect worse episode pollutions. It is a probability, but we cannot go out and say that at this very moment. We have to wait for all the data to be processed after the year is over.
Yes, there is you were saying that it's really important to see climate change and air pollution together. There is one thing that I find missing in the bulletin is the impact on human health and how many deaths, for example, excess deaths there are. Is there? I know that WHO had a study out in 2019 where they were trying to have an evaluation on that, but could you foresee that you guys would work together to have everything in one bulletin, in one document where we could see what the impact on human life is?
Yeah. So this particular bulletin is on heat waves. We do work very, very closely with the World Health Organization. We've got a joint office, WMO, WHO Office on Climate and Health. And in fact, next week on the 14th of September, we are releasing a report, United in Science. So that's a compilation of science from many different partners within the UN and outside. And there is a chapter in that on climate and health, and that does give figures on heat waves as well. So that will be next week.
Well, I could add to that the example of the heat wave and high surface ozone episode that the bulletin covers during the 2022 heat wave across Western Europe. There we saw a clear relationship between a heat wave and increases in surface ozone beyond the guideline limits established by the WHO. So there you have a clear and direct impact on human health by having ground level ozone levels that are beyond what WHO has established as a safe level. So you can see these kind of impacts. Of course, it takes time for those data to be processed and for people, scientists at WHO, to fully and directly assess the health impact of these kind of events.
Also in the bulletin is the PM 2.5. That is also another parameter that is considered in this WHO air quality guidelines. There are specific threshold exceedances where you can assess the impact on health. But in any case, it's very important also how the authorities are managing the alerts. Then correlate the concentrations with the impact in health and then potential mortality indexes. Is, as Lorenzo said, is also having a composition that is the human intervention, how the authorities are managing the risk and communicate to the population this risk. For that reason, it's very important the forecasting that we are conducting at WMO, that forecasting activities for promoting early warning systems and help to the authorities.
Go online now. Bianca. I'll do you afterwards. I'll do a couple. Bianca Rothier, Global TV, you've had your hand up for a long time.
Yes, thanks a lot. Yeah, my question is focused on Brazil. I would appreciate if you could share a quick view on the conditions in Brazil, like relation between the fires, the deforestation in the Amazon forest, for example, and the quality of the air, and also on climate change. And I have also a more specific question. Not sure if you are following, but there is an extratropical cyclone that has been causing a terrible damage in the south of Brazil with more than 20 deaths. What could explain it, and could it be related to the climate change, everything that we have been facing? Thanks a lot.
Thank you for your question. I'll try, I'll have a stab at the first question first. The situation in the Amazon forest is a very complicated one. The Amazon is a very complex system to begin with. And we know that deforestation is one of the factors that is affecting the normal functioning of the forest as an ecosystem, and at the same time increasing levels of air pollution in areas of Brazil. There are certain parts in the Amazon basin that have become net sources of CO2 as opposed to sinks. So, but the situation is very complicated and is very much in evolution. So we cannot at a moment say what the situation will be down the line, because that partly depends on how the deforestation and wildfire control works at a given time. And this is also a situation that is changing by the year. But definitely, land clearing and a slash and burn agriculture in the Amazon basin are two factors that severely affect air quality and affect the ability of the Amazon forest to sequester carbon for certain. Concerning your second question, yes, we are aware of that cyclone. However, we should not and are not in a position to ascribe any one event to climate change in particular. I mean, what climate change does, it's usually enhances the possibility or makes it more likely for extreme weather events to happen and to be repeated in the future. That we have seen, and studies are out that basically quantified the likelihood of weather events increasing as a result of climate change. But we should not fall into the temptation of adjudicate one single event to climate change. They may be enhanced, they may be more likely than before, but yes, it is an unfortunate event. Thank you.
So we'll go in the room now. Isabel from EFE, Spanish News Agency.
Yes, Isabel Saco with EFE. I would like to clarify in the press release, you are noting the negative impact of the degrading quality of the air and pollution. But I would like to be clear if this degradation, you observe this degradation all over the world, or is in particular in some parts, in some regions of the world? Because at a certain moment you mentioned the situation is less bad in Europe than now. We are expecting that in Europe, that in East South Asia. So if you can just differentiate the situation by regions. And if and secondly, on the impact on human health, could you just mention what are the conditions or pathologies that are exacerbated because of the aggravating situation of air pollution, degraded situation? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, the situation concerning degradation of air quality around the world is a very complex picture. When I was mentioning particulate matter levels around the world, that was very specific to particulate matter concentrations. That was at the start of the bulletin. That situation changes when you're talking about different pollutants, be them ozone or be them volatile organic compounds. So it is a very mixed situation depending on the emissions that you have in different countries. What is certainly true is that the whole world population suffers from decreased air quality. So that is a global phenomenon. It is tends to be worse in urbanized areas compared to rural areas, but those suffer as well. So we cannot go and give you a global picture of what the atmospheric pollution situation is, because it will depend on the time of the year, it will depend on the emissions at a particular point in time and a particular place in the world. So you can, for example, specify what a certain pollutant is doing in certain parts of the world at any one time, but in one way or another, the whole population of the globe is affected by degradations in air quality. Concerning your second question, which is the specific effects on human health that degraded air quality might bring about, I'm not an expert in the topic, but I know that, for example, for the case of ozone, you have an exacerbation in cardiorespiratory illnesses, particularly preliminary pre-existing conditions such as asthma, respiratory conditions, and heart conditions as well. There might be others as well, but I'm not in the best positions to be more specific than that.
Okay, then we'll go back. Jamey Keaten from Associated Press.
Good morning. Thank you, Claire. I appreciate it. I just wanted to try to get a bit of perspective on the heat record, if we could. Can we expect worse to come because El Nino has not kicked in yet? I mean, we know that temperatures will fall in the Northern Hemisphere because the summer is ending. But how much do El Nino and the carryover effects from the hot summer and the high ocean temperatures suggest that September and beyond could also see above average heat? And if I could just maybe ask to Mr. Labrador, I just want to be very clear. These heat waves that we've seen this summer will necessarily translate into poorer air quality and thus health impacts. Is that very, I mean, just very succinctly, is that what this all means, what we've seen in the last few months? Thank you so much.
Thank you for your questions. Yeah, I'll try to address the first one, which is the possible impacts of El Nino with respect to the air quality situation, degradation of air quality. That is not an easy one to answer. It's simply El Nino is just kicking in. We have not fully started to see the effects of El Nino yet. They will most likely be realized towards the end of the year, beginning of next year. What the situation will be vis-a-vis the degradation of air quality, I will not venture to give you an answer because it depends on many interrelated and interdependent factors that we cannot really quantify at this moment. We know that we expect probably temperatures to be on the rise as a result of El Nino. It tends to increase temperature in certain parts of the world, we know that, but how that will interact with climate change and in turn with air quality is something that we have to wait and see. But if heat waves increase as a result of El Nino, yes, we may probably expect a further degradation in air quality as a whole. With respect to the second part of your question is whether we expect the record heat waves that we've experienced this summer to have an effect on air quality. The simple answer, yes, is that we expect to see some effect as well. As I said before, we are not sure of the magnitude of that effect, given the non-linearity of the relationship between air quality and climate change and the interactions and chemical reactions that mediate both of them. So we have to wait and see how the year will pan out at the end of it, what the temperatures will have been, and what the measurements regarding air quality will be. As we speak, the scientific community is very busy at work processing those data, collecting the data and processing those data. And we're going to have to wait until the end of this year, beginning of next year, to start to see the results of the heat waves this year on air quality as well.
If I could perhaps just follow up on the first part of the question. So the figures released this morning by Copernicus Climate Change Service said that and this is on one data set, it's the ERA 5 data set. WMO, when we compile our State of the Climate reports, we use 6 data sets, and the ERA 5 is one of them. So the ERA 5 data set said that the year to date, so till the end of August, has so far been the second hottest on record, just behind 2016, which was a very strong El Nino year. As my colleague Lorenzo said, traditionally we expect the temperature effects of El Nino to play out in the second year after development. So in this case, it would be 2024. But we are already seeing, very high temperatures ahead of the full impact of El Nino. And the record Atlantic sea surface temperatures, for instance, came ahead of and are not directly related to El Nino. So, and just to remind you that back in May, the World Meteorological Organization, we issued a report, predictions for the coming 5 years. And we said that it's 98% certain that one of the next 5 years, so until 2027, I think, will be the warmest on record, and that there is a 66% chance that one of those years within that 5-year period will pass temporarily, and we stress temporarily, will temporarily pass the 1.5 degree Celsius limit. Thank you. And now we go to Jérémie Lanche, Radio France. Jérémie, I didn't say Lorenzo is francophone, so if you would like to ask your question in French, please feel free.
Thank you so much, Claire. And indeed, I will ask it in French then, si c'est possible. Juste 3 questions. La première, pour vous, Monsieur Labrador, c'était peut-être, est-ce que, j'ai bien compris que vous ne faites pas partie de WHO, mais est-ce que vous pouvez vous risquer, en tout cas, à émettre une hypothèse que pendant qu'il y a des vagues de chaleur, est-ce qu'il y a un risque que finalement il y ait plus de décès liés à la dégradation de la qualité de l'air qu'à la température en elle-même? Est-ce que ça, c'est une possibilité? Est-ce qu'on est en mesure de le dire aujourd'hui? La deuxième question, c'est sur l'intensité qui augmente des vagues de chaleur, la fréquence aussi. Mais est-ce qu'on peut dire aussi que la durée des vagues de chaleur augmente et que la période de l'année pendant laquelle elles arrivent, que ce soit l'hémisphère nord ou l'hémisphère sud, augmente aussi? Ça, c'est quelque chose, c'est pas forcément la même chose, mais je ne le vois pas dans le bulletin. Et peut-être une troisième question, mais c'était sur la répartition géographique, on en a parlé tout à l'heure, mais est-ce qu'il y a un seul endroit dans le monde qui est épargné aujourd'hui par les vagues de chaleur?
Merci de votre question, Jérémie. Je vais essayer de répondre une par une. Par rapport à la première question, je n'ose pas aventurer une prévision à propos des effets sur la santé humaine à propos des vagues de chaleur dans l'avenir, mais je peux vous parler des choses qui sont déjà passées, telles que la vague de chaleur en 2003, où il y a eu une intensification des épisodes de descente de la surface dans une grande partie du continent européen. Et aussi, on a eu une augmentation assez forte de la taux de mortalité pendant cette vague de chaleur aussi. Donc, plutôt qu'aventurer une prognose, je me réfère à des choses qui se sont déjà passées où on a une évidence claire et forte des effets des vagues de chaleur sur la santé humaine. Et 2003, c'est un des meilleurs exemples qu'on peut trouver sur le continent européen. Pendant la deuxième question, si je ne me trompe, c'était à propos des vagues de chaleur, si on peut faire une prévision à propos s'ils vont être plus forts et plus longues. Il y a une possibilité que le changement climatique, le réchauffement climatique va intensifier et va multiplier le nombre de vagues de chaleur aussi que leur intensité. Je ne suis pas maintenant en position à vous donner des figures à propos d'une telle augmentation, mais on commence à voir déjà plus de vagues de chaleur qu'on le voyait avant et des vagues de chaleur qui sont aussi fortes et assez persistantes. Donc, on peut attendre que, comme la plupart des événements liés à la météorologie extrême, les vagues de chaleur vont se multiplier et peut-être être assez plus forts qu'il était avant. Donc, ça, c'est une possibilité. À propos de la troisième question, y a-t-il un endroit qui a été épargné par les vagues de chaleur? Je ne sais pas, mais on a eu des vagues de chaleur même en Chili, maintenant où c'est l'hiver. Même dans l'Antarctique, on a enregistré des températures qui étaient complètement assez de la norme. Donc, on arrive à avoir des vagues de chaleur même dans des continents qui ne sont pas en été. Et ça, on commence à trouver vraiment pas normal. Donc, je ne suis pas sûr, je ne peux pas vous dire, il y a un endroit dans le monde, peut-être il faut aller à la montagne plus haute pour être frais, mais dans la plupart des environnements où les activités humaines se déroulent, on voit des vagues de chaleur qui se passent dans les étés. Donc, on n'est pas sûr qu'il y aura une telle place où on est épargné des vagues de chaleur.
Thank you for that. Jamey, do you have another question? Jamey Keaten of AP?
Hey, yeah, Claire, thank you so much. I just wanted to follow up on your response. Thank you so much for that. Just to be clear, I mean, based on the 2016 example that you mentioned, and the fact that El Nino's effects haven't fully kicked in yet, and air quality issues really aside, are the warning signs, including the high surface sea temperatures, all aligning now to lead WMO to believe that 2023 could be on track for a record too, and that the public could expect worse to come in the months ahead?
The data which have just been released say that we're so far the second warmest year on record. We have to wait and see what happens, you know, for the rest of the year when El Nino will start kicking in more. The example of 2016, it was a 2015/2016 El Nino, and we saw the record temperatures in 2016. But obviously, what is, you know, of particular concern this time around is the very high sea surface temperatures. And to reiterate, you know, our prediction that was issued earlier this year did say that there is a 98% chance that, you know, one of the next 5 years will be the warmest on record. So it's a matter of time. AFP.
Yes, thank you. It's not directly related to the bulletin, but there was a really interesting post overnight by a scientist called Patrick Brown that you might know. He published a recent study in Nature about the link between climate change and forest fires. So there was a lot of talk about this study because, you know, the climate change. And overnight, he came out posting on X that basically said he had been forced to push the role that climate change is playing to make sure that he was going to be published in an important journal. So I was just wondering, first of all, are you aware of that? And would you have a comment on that? Because there is now a lot of debate and it also has to do with the topic we're discussing. Thank you.
I can do it. Yeah, I read the post. It's very interesting, the discussion, I have to say, from a research point of view, what is publicable in some high impact journals. And it's true that climate change now is a very trendy topic. And if you can explain anything connected with climate change, is having more visibility in media. This is right. And the study is really pointing questions that are beyond climate. Is again, the strategies beyond the occurrence of, you have a risk, and is the authorities and the mitigation and adaptation strategies around this risk, what is playing a role? Then, yeah, it's very interesting discussion in this paper is pointing that some fires maybe are not really connected with climate, it's more the fuel, the vegetation that maybe the authorities are not cleaning, the forest. Then it's really relevant, this discussion, because not everything maybe are connected with climate change, and these kind of papers are pointing these facts, and also how as a society we can fight, let's say, from the risk that the information is providing you. You have models, you have observations, you have projections, and you can use this information to really face any of these risks. And yeah, very interesting discussions.
If I can just add, there's also, I think there's a distinction between fire weather, so weather which is conducive to wildfires, and the fires themselves. So, you know, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports, you know, do address, you know, the issue of fire weather, but, you know, you can light a fire with, you know, with a match or a cigarette or, you know, faulty electrical wires, and that's not necessarily to do with climate change.
Just to follow up, if I may, the The problem is also that he was forced to angle his story more on climate change. In fact, that's what he's saying. I don't know, to make sure that it was going to be read. So let me just ask very bluntly: is that something that would happen at WMO?
I can say some words if you want. It's okay. I mean, in WMO, we are doing research on understanding the processes that are connected with the aerosol chemistry and atmospheric chemistry, and what is the different processes connected with the increase of emissions of particulate matter or other primary emissions. And we try to assess really the impact in the different time scales. There are processes that occurs very in short time, weeks, days, hours, and there are others that are more connected with long-term periods. Then in our case, we are focusing to identify those components that are more connected with climate change processes or climate itself, and the ones that are more connected with weather. If there is a priority in which is more important, I can tell you that in our case, we are working at the same level. There are also programs that are focusing in climate, like the WCRP program. And there is another one that is focusing in weather scales, meaning the WWRP program, the World Weather Research Program and the World Climate Research Program. And we are like cross-cutting between both of them because atmospheric chemistry is in both scales, and we are working together for understanding better these processes and can give you more information and better tools. Yeah.
Okay, with that, I can't see any more questions. So thank you very much for joining us. I know it's a very busy day with human rights. As I mentioned, we will be having a press conference next week with our Secretary General on the United in Science report. So we'll send out details of that. And thank you very much.